Happy Friday, welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma, let's balance my books. At the beginning of June I started off with 47 books on my TBR, and the aim of this game, Balancing the Books, is to add up everything that came onto my TBR throughout June and everything that went off my TBR throughout June and try and make those numbers balance. So let's see how I did. The very first thing I did in June was read a book from my TBR, so that's a good place to start. I read Ocean State by a man called possibly Stewart Onan. Is she right? Have I got that name right? She's a genius. It's Stewart Onan. Okay, Ocean State by Stewart Onan. This was a book with really great potential to have been a book I loved that ended up being profoundly meh. The premise of the book is really interesting. So it's about a woman looking back on her childhood or her teenagerhood and says, like from the very first line, says that when she was a teenager, her older sister helped murder someone. And we then see that play out and we actually jump between different characters. So we have the sister who's narrating it. We also jump to the sister who killed someone and we get to hear her side of the story. And we also hear from their mother. Yeah, she's a character. And finally, we hear from the girl who got murdered. And we learn that there was this kind of teenage love triangle going on. So I can't remember any of the people's names, but the girl who ends up getting murdered was having an affair with the murderer girl's boyfriend. And I found reading her sections really sad because she's really in love with this boy and she really thinks that he's in love with her, but everything he says to her is so shit. He's so clearly not, but she really just like has a lot of hope. And you know where this is going in the end, so that was all a little bit like gut-wrenching to read. So a lot of the way through I was thinking this was going to be a really, really good book. But there were some strange things about it. Once we got up to this murder that you had been waiting for the whole book, I then just wasn't sure what the book was doing with that, what the point of that was supposed to be. We suddenly jump forward in time and we hear from that younger sister, and the conclusion that she draws on the whole thing is so bafflingly unrelated to anything else in the book that it just left me completely cold at the end of something that I had been quite emotionally invested in up until that point. I also thought the author made some quite strange choices with the narration. So we're jumping around hearing from these different characters in third person, but then we also hear from the younger sister who narrates it in first person as well as in third person. It goes between both, and I wasn't quite sure what the distinction of that was supposed to be. So the whole way through I felt like he was trying to do something and I didn't quite get what it was. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy myself for a lot of the time. Most of the time I was feeling very emotionally invested in this story, seeing what was going to happen, wondering how the girl who you know is going to end up murdering someone, how she gets herself to that point. Because for a lot of the time you're following her and you're in her head, you're empathizing with her, you quite like her as a character. So how did she get to this point? So I really enjoyed all of that stuff. But overall, it's kind of a weird book. Then, as you may have seen if you watched my Women's Prize reading vlog, I bought these two books, The Bread the Devil Knead and The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This one is by Lisa Allen-Agostini. These were both on the Women's Prize shortlist and I wanted to read the whole shortlist this year. So I bought these two and I read these two. The Bread the Devil Knead is a really, really sad book about a woman who is in an abusive relationship, and she's a great character. You hear a lot about her past, which is incredibly traumatic, so I found this book very difficult to read, but she is a great character and you're really rooting for her, and she is very, I don't know the right words for it. Everyone in her life is telling her that she needs to get out of this relationship, and she knows ultimately that she does, but my heart really went out to her, seeing her, following her making this decision and kind of pushing everyone away for a while and then realising that she did need to leave. So that was all like amazingly emotional to read. The book is all written in Trinidadian Creole, and when I went, as you may see in the vlog, I went to the readings the night before the prize announcement and the author read a bit out, and I loved hearing it brought to life with her reading it in that dialect because in my head I couldn't get it quite right, so that really helped. And actually I would quite like to have her read the whole audiobook to me. I think I gave this one 4 stars, possibly 3 stars, because actually I didn't enjoy it. It was really, really good, but I was just kind of wanting it to be over because I was finding it just so sad and so unbearable to read, but it is really, really good. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich is a very strange book. This one I did give 3 stars to. It tells the year in the life of a bookshop a bookshop run by these Indigenous American women, and it specialises... Are you okay, little hippo? Hippo snorting in the background. The bookshop is run by Indigenous American women, and they specialise in Indigenous books. And the bookshop is haunted by the ghost of a white woman who was like one of their most loyal customers, but was always kind of annoying them, claiming to have Indigenous heritage. I found it a quite difficult novel to read because it's so weird. It's written in such a strange way and it's just bouncing around all the time. So I found it quite hard to get into it. But it is told over the course of this year, and the author said that she started writing it on All Hallows Eve, I think is when she started writing it, 2019, and said I'm just going to write for a year and whatever happens is going in the book. And of course, as we now know in hindsight, November 2019 to November 2020 was an incredibly dramatic year, and all of that suddenly comes into the book about halfway through. Pandemic breaks out, then George Floyd is murdered, and then the characters are going to protests. And I actually enjoyed the book more and more as it got into that like recognisable part of very recent history. But yeah, it's a strange one. I never officially unhauled this book after I DNF'd it before because I was considering picking it up again just because it did make it onto the Women's Prize shortlist. I didn't pick it up again because I decided life's too short to read a book that you don't like. And then of course, SOS Lord, this book won the Women's Prize. So the 1 year I tried to read the whole shortlist, this was the only one that I did manage to finish, and this was the one that won. Classic, but I am now unhauling it because whatever. I'm not going to read it, it's too late. Then I bought a book, American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld. This one I am reading for my book club with my uni friends, and this was the book that was chosen this month. I'm about halfway through it, a little over halfway through it, so I'm not going to tell you much about it yet because I will wrap it up in next month's Balancing the Books. It's very long, is what I'll say. I've been reading this book for about 300 years so far. I'm on page 400. There's still another 250 pages to go. I'm enjoying it. I'll tell you more about it later. This was a book that Raf gave me, Notes on Execution by Danya Kukafka. So Raf actually went to an event at Book Bar, which is a great bookshop, by the way. If you're in London, you should go to it. And while she was there, she bought this book, and I now can't quite remember how I ended up snaffling this one. She came to my house having just bought it, and I saw it and was like, oh, I want that, I think is essentially what happened. Because I read Danya Kukafka's last book, which was called Girl in Snow, and I really enjoyed it, so I had my eye on this one for a while. So I saw this one in Raf's haul, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to have this in my haul instead. I read Everything You Ever Wanted by Louisa Sauma. This one had been on my TBR for a while now, since last year. You may have seen, if you watched my favourite books of the year so far video, that this made it into my favourite books of the year so far. This book was brilliant and wild. It's about a millennial woman living in London, and she's working for like a digital media agency, and she's completely bored of her job and bored of her life, but then we learn that it actually goes a lot deeper than that. She actually has struggled with feeling suicidal for many years since she was a teenager, and so we kind of slowly dive into her mental health problems and quite how deep they go. So that's Iris. She is the main character, and while struggling with just not really enjoying her life at all, she finds out about this program where you can get sent to another planet called Nyx. And this planet can only be reached through a wormhole in the Pacific Ocean, so it's like a different dimension. And they are sending people there for a reality TV show to go and start a whole new life on Nyx. The catch being, you can never, ever come back, and you can't communicate with anyone on Earth either. And Iris thinks this sounds great, so she signs up for it, and then the second half of the book takes place on Nyx. And the book is really exploring suicide. Her friends and family back on Earth view this as suicide. Essentially, she's saying goodbye to her life and leaving. And the second half of the book has a really big tone shift, because the first half is quite funny, it's darkly funny. The second half, I think maybe there are still like funny moments, but it's a much darker tone suddenly as she kind of grapples with the reality of this decision that she's made. I found it fascinating. It's based on a true thing, I think it ends up being a scam, so it wasn't true, but there really was a reality TV show that they were advertising for to send people on a one-way ticket to Mars, and that was wild that happened, and so the author was inspired by that. So I loved going down that whole rabbit hole. So it really is something that left me thinking a lot about the implications of this. I had read about the Mars thing at the time, and it just stressed me out, the concept of it. This book is very sad. It's very good. I already talked loads about it in my favourite books of the year so far video, so you can go and watch that if you want to hear me say even more about it. And then finally, I took this book home from work and I read it basically all in one day. This is 12% Dread by Emily McGovern, and this is a graphic novel. It is, again, about the ennui of young millennials living in London. But this one, there are 3 main characters and they all end up involved in some way working for this massive great tech company called Arco. And it reminded me of The Circle in like the terrifyingness of this company that is trying to track everyone all the time, and the reach of it goes like so much further than people realise, and they've got these like secret links to the government, so it's a sort of dystopia. There are other elements of sci-fi in here as well that I won't ruin, because they're quite fun when they get revealed. It's a bizarre book, but I really enjoyed it. I've never read a graphic novel quite like this one, in the fact that it jumps around so much. So even on the page, it's constantly jumping between different conversations that different people are having. So I had to pay attention to it, I think more so than I have to other graphic novels in the past, but I quite liked learning that discipline. Also, this one is very funny. There are lots of scenes in here that really made me chuckle. So the conclusion of all of that is that I did balance my books, and in fact, I overbalanced them. I have brought my TBR down by 1. I now have just 46 books left on my TBR, so that is fantastic. That number is probably not going to change anytime soon, because I think I'll be reading American Wife for the rest of my life, but 46 books left to read ain't too bad. There they all are. That's my TBR shelf right there. All 46 of them. Let me know in the comments what you have been reading this month and what you've particularly enjoyed. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon.
Maybe we could go to the mall, get our nails done, get our hair done, we fly. Maybe we could holler at the boys, looking so good, whistle when they walk by. Cause we know what they want, but we just laugh. Yeah, we won't let them get away with that. We walk tall.